Hi, comrades. Welcome back to my channel. What if I tell you every good thing I've ever done was just for fame, for profit, or just to buy my way into heaven after I die? Would you still consider me as a good person? I know many people listening right now are probably thinking, oh, that's disgustingly hypocritical. But what if I'm a strict utilitarian? So I would ask you, if my actions bring happiness to the majority, who cares if my motives were dirty? Philosophers had been tearing each other apart over this exact question for 2,500 years. Your kindness, is it pure gold or is just absolutely rubbish? Today, let's talk about it. First of all, let's look at our founding father of Western philosophy, Plato. In Plato's view, the good deeds we see in our daily lives aren't actually the goodness themselves. They are just a blurry, imperfect shadow of it. Plato believed that above our messy reality, there is a world of perfect, eternal concepts called forms. Everything in our world is just a bad copy. And on the top of this absolute spiritual world sits the ultimate song, the form of the good. Plato tells a famous story. Imagine we are prisoners chained in a dark cave from birth, facing a blank wall. Behind us is a fire, and people are carrying objects past it. All we can see are the shadows of these objects projected onto the wall. To us, the shadows are the reality. But then, one prisoner breaks free. He escapes the cave and sees the reality. And finally, he looks up and sees the sun. To Plato, that sun is goodness. So Plato's goodness is an objective, cosmic truth. Ordinary people don't get it. You have to endure years of brutal intellectual training to escape the cave and see the light. It's a very elitist, grand perspective. Now, if the ancient Chinese philosopher Mengzi heard Plato's song theory, he would probably shake his head and say, my friend, you are overcomplicating things. Why make goodness so distant? To Mengzi, you don't need to escape any cave to find the sun, because the sun already lives inside of your heart. This is Mengzi's famous theory, 性善, which means we're all born with the potential of goodness. To prove this, he gives us one of the most famous thought experiments in Chinese history. Imagine you're walking on the street and you suddenly see a baby crawling right towards the edge of a deep open well. In a split second, before your brain can even think, your body moves. You rush over to grab the baby. Mengzi asks, why did you do that? You didn't do it to become a hero in the news. You didn't do it to get a reward from the parents. You didn't do it because you feared being judged by your neighbors. You did it purely out of a raw, hardwired human instinct. Mengzi called this the heart of the compassion. Mengzi believed that goodness isn't a set of code rules you learn from society. It is as natural as a human being having two arms and two legs. He compared our inner goodness to a freshwater spring bubbling up from the ground. Our only job in life is not to find the goodness, but to make sure that we don't block that spring, allowing it to naturally flow into a grand river. Now that we've talked about where the goodness comes from, let's talk about how we actually practice them in real life. This brings us to the round two, and our first guest is perhaps the most hardcore moral philosopher in history, Immanuel Kant. Kant would look at Mengzi's heart of compassion and say, sorry, but emotion is a terrible foundation for morality. Why? Because emotions are unstable. If you do something good just because it feels right, or because you love someone, Kant says that it doesn't count as true goodness. To Kant, goodness must be based on pure, cold, unshakable reason. He calls this categorical imperative. It means a moral rule must be absolute law that applies to everyone, everywhere, at any time, without any exception. No excuses, no it depends. Let me give you his most infamous example, never lie. Kant believes that lying is always wrong. Imagine an ex-murderer knocks on your door and is looking for your best friend who is hiding in your closet. The murderer asks, is your friend here? Most of us would lie to save a life, right? But according to a strict interpretation of Kant's logic, you cannot lie. Because if you lie, you break the universal law of truth, and you destroy the very foundation of morality. It sounds crazy and incredibly cold, right? It says you don't compromise your principle for anyone, anything. If you think Kant is too rigid, you are not alone. 2,500 years ago, a Chinese man named Confucius would totally disagree with him. Confucius would say, a morality that forces you to betray your best friend and your family, that isn't goodness, that's cruelty. In Western philosophy, goodness is often about following universal rules, but in Confucianism, goodness is about navigating human relationships. He calls this core virtue ren, in English means benevolence. And where does ren begin? It begins at your home with your family. In Chinese, we say this in Shao. In translation, is filial piety. Confucius believed it's completely natural and good to be biased toward the person you love. We love our parents more than strangers. That is not a moral failure, that's human nature. There is a brilliant showdown in Analects that perfectly captured us. A local governor proudly brags to Confucius, saying, in my town, the people are so upright and good. There was a father stole a sheep, and his own son went to the police testify to against him. The governor expected Confucius to praise the boy, but Confucius just looks at him and sighed, in my town, good people don't act like that. A father covers for his son, and a son covers for his father. True uprightness, true goodness is found right there in the mutual protection. To Confucius, to protect the bond between a father and a son is infinitely more valuable than a legal code or an abstract moral rule about a ship. So look at the massive clash we have here. For Kant, goodness is blind for relationships. Everyone is treated exactly the same on the law of reason. It is beautiful because it's perfectly fair, but it's freezing cold. For Confucius, goodness is a ripple in the river. It starts warm and strong in the center with your family. And then you naturally push a love outwards towards your neighbors, your community, and eventually the world. It's warm and deeply human, but it's inherently biased. So, if you were forced to choose, would you rather live in Kant's perfect icy rules or Confucius' words of warm, biased relationships? Think about that because now things are going to be more complicated. Welcome to our round three, utilitarianism versus Lao Tzu. Alright, so Kant gives us absolute rules and Confucius gives us the family bonds. But what if we threw both of them away? What about goodness isn't about your inner duty or who you love, but simply about the math? Welcome to round three, where Western philosophy turns morality into a calculator. This is utilitarianism, led by thinkers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. Utilitarians have one golden rule, the greatest happiness principle. To them, your motivations don't matter at all. The only thing that defines goodness is outcome, specifically producing maximum amount of pleasure and minimum amount of pain to the greatest number of people. Think about it like a moral spreadsheet. If a decision brings 100 points of happiness and 10 points of pain, it is net positive. It is good. 上善若水. It means the highest goodness is like water. This brings us to the ultimate philosophical meme, the trolley problem. A runaway train is about to kill five people on the tracks. You can pull a lever to redirect it onto another track, but it will kill one innocent person instead. What does a pure utilitarian do? They pull the lever without a second thought. Why? Because five lives saved and one life lost equals a net gain of four lives. It's simple math. To them, sacrificing minority to save the majority isn't just acceptable, it is the very definition of goodness. It's logical, it's highly efficient, and it's how modern governments make big policy decisions every single day. But it also turns human lives into a mere number on a balance sheet. Now, if you tell the ancient master Lao Tzu that goodness is just a math problem, he would probably laugh in your face. In his book, The Tao Te Ching, he wrote a line that completely flips it on its head. He says, when the world knows goodness as good, there arises recognition of evil. So, what does that mean? Lao Tzu is trying to warning us the moment you're trying to defining, labeling, and calculating goodness, you actually create hypocrisy. The moment you force people to compete over who is better or who is more moral, you ruin the natural balance of the world. So, what is Lao Tzu's version of supreme goodness? It's not a math question, it's water. Think about water. It nourishes everything on earth, but it never asks for credit. It doesn't fight, it doesn't calculate, and it doesn't argue. Instead, it naturally flows downward, willingly to stay in the low, humble places that everyone despises. Lao Tzu is not telling you to sit on the couch and do nothing. He's telling you to stop forcing things. True goodness isn't about aggressively trying to fix a word or a spreadsheets. It's about aligning yourself with the natural flow of the universe, the Tao. You do good things not because you calculated the points of the happiness, but because it is as natural to you as water flowing downhill. So instead of seeing this as a contest where one side lost and the other wins, think of it as two different powerful tools for life. Utilitarianism gives us a macro perspective. When you are running a society making public policies, you have to look at the numbers. You have to care about the greatest good for the greatest number. And it's a backbone of how our modern society functions. Lao Tzu, on the other hand, gives us a micro perspective. It's an antidote to our modern anxiety when we get too obsessed with calculating every outcome, trying to control every variable, and constantly tracking our moral scores. Lao Tzu reminds us to breathe. He teaches us sometimes the most profound good comes from dropping our egos and aligning ourselves with the moment. One is about the responsibility of managing the world. The other is about the wisdom of living with it. Now we've traveled thousands of years of human wisdom. We looked at Plato's cosmic sun, Mengzi's inner spring, Kant's absolute duty, Confucius' family bonds, utilitarian math, and Lao Tzu's flowing water. But then we arrived at the modern era, and philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche and existentialists showed up with a hammer. They looked at all these grand systems and shattered them. They said, stop looking for excuses. There is no cosmic guidebook written in the stars. There is no infallible sage to tell you what to do. And there is no universal calculator can save your life. To modern existentialism, the universe is inherently silent. There is no pre-written definition of goodness waiting for you to discover. And while it sounds terrifying, it is also incredibly liberating because it means the power of defying goodness had been handed right back to you. You are not a passive follower of the rules. You are the author. Every choice you make is a stroke of the pen defining what is good in this universe. Looking back at all these great minds, you start to see a beautiful cultural contrast. Western philosophy often works like a sharp scalpel. It uses fierce logic and precise reason to cut through the chaos, trying to dissect the ultimate universal rule of goodness. Chinese philosophy, on the other hand, works more like a gentle, warming medicine. It doesn't care as much about abstract formulas. Instead, it cares about how we heal, how we find peace, and how we anchor our soul with this messy, chaotic reality of everyday life. So, what is goodness? Anyway, that's a lot to process. If you are still here, thanks you for sitting through the whole ramble with me. I'm genuinely curious about how this lands with you. When things get chaotic in your life, which of these perspectives you feel helpful? And which one makes sense to your reality? Drop a comment below. I'd love to read your thoughts. And if you like having these philosophic chats, stick around, hit subscribe, and we'll do it again. Until next time, take care of yourself.